Huh?
We can always go eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
Hey, let's do one potato, two potato, huh?
Barney Miller, the tragic fates behind TV's funniest cop show. Have you ever laughed until your stomach hurt, only to find out, years later, that the people who made you laugh were carrying some of the heaviest burdens off camera? Welcome to Barney Miller, one of the most quietly brilliant sitcoms ever made, a show set almost entirely within the tired walls of a New York police precinct, yet bursting with life, sarcasm, and soul. It was never flashy, never tried to be, and yet it still managed to change television forever. Premiering in 1975 and running through 1982, Barney Miller became a cult hit among critics and thinking viewers, those who appreciated smart writing, subtle performances, and deeply human stories. It wasn't just a comedy, it was sociology, it was psychology, it was satire wrapped in a donut box of deadpan delivery. But behind the dry one-liners and broken coffee makers was a cast that didn't just act, they lived. And, tragically, many of them have now left us. Ron Glass, Steve Landesberg, Jack Sue, Abe Vigoda, Ron Carey, Gregory Sierra, James Gregory. Each of them, iconic, irreplaceable, brought more than just talent to their roles. They brought pain, struggle, pride, and in some cases, controversy. You might remember their characters, the fashion-forward Harris, the encyclopedic Dietrich, the world-weary Fish, the deadpan Yemena. But how much do you really know about the men behind them? What was Jack Sue hiding while filming season 5? Why did Ron Glass disappear from the spotlight after Barney Miller ended? What dark humor surrounded Abe Vigoda's name for decades? Who among them was considered difficult to work with, and why? This isn't just a trip down memory lane. This is the story of artists who burned bright on screen and, in many cases, battled storms off it. In this video, we're digging deeper. Beyond the scripts. Beyond the applause. Beyond the camera. What became of these beloved actors? What demons did they wrestle with? Who soared after the series, and who fell silently into obscurity? Subscribe to our channel and stay tuned, as we uncover the real lives behind the badges, the jokes, and the coffee-stained uniforms of Barney Miller. Because behind every great sitcom, is a story no one dared to write. Until now. Jack Sue, the comic who laughed through quiet pain. Long before he ever deadpanned a line as Detective Nick Yemena, Jack Sue knew how to survive. Born Goro Suzuki in Oakland, California in 1917, he was the son of Japanese immigrants. But his path to stardom didn't begin in Hollywood, it began in a government-run internment camp during World War II, where Japanese Americans were imprisoned simply for their heritage. It was there, behind barbed wire, that he first discovered performance as a form of escape. After the war, he took the name Jack Sue, partly to avoid anti-Asian discrimination and partly because a Chinese nightclub owner refused to hire a Japanese singer. It was a necessary reinvention, and one of many. He hustled his way from nightclub stages to Broadway, where he starred in Flower Drum Song, becoming one of the first Asian Americans to secure a major role on the American stage without playing a stereotype. By the time Barney Miller came calling in 1975, Sue was already a seasoned performer, known for his dry delivery and silky singing voice. But nothing quite prepared audiences for Nick Yemena, a low-key, poker-faced detective with a fondness for terrible coffee and quietly devastating sarcasm. Sue didn't just play Yemena, he lived him. The subtle micro-expressions, the underplayed gags, the way he could say more with a look than others did with paragraphs, it was a masterclass in minimalism. What viewers didn't know, what even some cast members didn't know, was that Jack Sue was dying. In the middle of the 5th season, Sue was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. He kept it private, continuing to work until he physically couldn't. No public statements. No fanfare. Just quiet strength and dignity. He filmed his final scenes in 1978 and passed away the following January at just 61 years old. His death wasn't treated as a plot point. It wasn't written into the script. Instead, the cast and crew dedicated an entire episode to him, not the character, the man. They spoke directly to the camera, telling stories about Jack. There was no laughter track. No acting. Just grief, love, and raw humanity. It was one of the first times in sitcom history that a show broke character to mourn a real person. But Jack Sue's story isn't just a tragedy. It's a legacy. He broke barriers for Asian American actors at a time when the industry only wanted caricatures. He resisted playing submissive roles, refused to fake accents, and insisted on being portrayed as an equal. In Barney Miller, he got what he deserved, not as a token, but as a cornerstone. He made America laugh, even as he was quietly dying inside. And that, perhaps, is the truest kind of strength. Abe Vigoda, the man who outlived his own death, until he didn't. There are actors who chase youth their whole careers. Abe Vigoda never had to. He was born old, or at least, he looked it. Born Abraham Charles Vigoda on February 24, 1921, in Brooklyn, New York, he was the son of a tailor and one of 3 brothers. He didn't burst onto the Hollywood scene, he quietly trudged in after years of off-Broadway plays and live television appearances. He didn't have the face for leading man status, and that, paradoxically, became his greatest weapon. Before Barney Miller, Vigoda was already a known quantity in a very different world, The Godfather. Yes, that's him as Sal Tessio, the trusted mobster who betrays Michael Corleone and ends up famously sleeping with the fishes. That role gave him gravitas, but Barney Miller gave him soul. When he took on the role of Detective Phil Fish in 1975, no one expected much, just a few grumpy one-liners, maybe a running joke about hemorrhoids. What audiences got was comedy gold. Fish wasn't just old, he embodied exhaustion. He moved like every joint owed him money. He sighed like breathing was a burden. And yet, he was deeply lovable. Children adored him. Adults related to him. And comedians envied him. Vigoda turned weariness into an art form. And then came the death rumor. In 1982, People magazine mistakenly listed Abe Vigoda as dead. It was a typo, but it sparked one of the most bizarre running gags in entertainment history. For decades, late-night hosts, websites, and even Saturday Night Live ran with it. Vigoda, to his credit, leaned into the joke. He posed in a coffin for Variety, attended roasts about his own mortality, and once said, "I'm still alive. I just can't prove it." But behind the joke was a man who struggled to escape the role of Fish. After leaving Barney Miller in season 4 to headline his own spin-off, Fish, the show flopped. Vigoda's career stalled. Casting directors saw only one thing. An old man in slow motion. He appeared sporadically in TV guest spots, sometimes parodying himself, but the serious dramatic work never came back. He lived quietly in New Jersey in his later years. No major scandals. No Hollywood excess. Just Abe and the myth of his immortality. And then, on January 26, 2016, at the age of 94, the punchline ended. He died in his sleep, peacefully. But in a strange way, the public had already grieved him, decades before he actually passed. That's the irony of Abe Vigoda. He was underestimated, mischaracterized, and, for a while, forgotten. Yet, in the world of Barney Miller, he was unforgettable. A symbol of every tired, underpaid, overworked soul who showed up anyway, with his pants sagging, back aching, and heart still beating. He was Fish. And he never really left. Ron Glass, the gentleman philosopher who hid in plain sight. If Barney Miller was a drab canvas of beige walls, busted chairs, and worn-out men, then Ron Glass was the splash of color that made it feel alive. Born on July 10, 1945, in Evansville, Indiana, Ron Glass was the youngest of 10 siblings in a devout Catholic family. He graduated from the University of Evansville with a double major in drama and literature, and that duality would shape his whole life. He was not just an actor. He was a thinker, a reader, a man who treated performance like theology. He was 30 when Barney Miller began filming, but he looked younger, sharp suits, clean-shaven, stylish even by today's standards. As Detective Ron Harris, he didn't just bring fashion into the precinct, he brought ambition. While the others grumbled about arrests and paperwork, Harris dreamt of publishing novels, sipping fine wine, and breaking out of the grind. He was the only character who made being a cop seem temporary. And that made Ron Glass stand out. But it also made him misunderstood. On screen, Harris was smooth, funny, ambitious, and black. That last part mattered, especially in the 1970s. In an era when black actors were often limited to comic relief or stereotype, Glass created a character with dignity, intellect, and flaws. Harris wasn't just the black guy in the precinct. He was the smartest guy in the room, and sometimes the most insecure. Off-screen, Glass was intensely private. Never married, never publicly attached to a partner, and rarely seen on the Hollywood party circuit, he lived a quiet life rooted in spirituality. A devoted Buddhist and student of the Soka Gakkai tradition, he once said he was more interested in inner peace than red carpets. But peace didn't always come easily. After Barney Miller ended, Glass found himself typecast, too intelligent looking for slapstick comedy, too urbane for gritty drama. He worked consistently, but rarely in roles that challenged him the way Harris had. He voiced characters in animation, appeared in Friends, Murder, She Wrote, and The Practice, but never truly found a vehicle that matched his depth. Then came Firefly. In 2002, Joss Whedon cast Glass as Shepherd Book, a gun-toting preacher with a mysterious past. It was a comeback, a rebirth. In many ways, it was the role Ron had waited decades for, complex, spiritual, morally ambiguous. Firefly was short-lived but deeply loved, and Glass once again earned cult status with a new generation of fans. And then, he disappeared. Ron Glass died quietly on November 25, 2016, of respiratory failure. He was 71. There was no media circus, no drawn-out illness. Just a brief headline, and silence. It was fitting. He had spent his life avoiding spectacle. In an industry obsessed with overexposure, Glass chose serenity. But those who knew him, those who worked with him, remember him as one of the kindest, wisest men to ever step onto a soundstage. In Barney Miller, he played the one man who seemed destined to outgrow the precinct. In real life, Ron Glass never needed to. He had already outgrown Hollywood. Steve Landesberg, the human encyclopedia with a locked-up past. There are actors who light up a room. Steve Landesberg wasn't one of them. He quietly rearranged the furniture, reorganized your bookshelf, and dropped a philosophical bomb mid-sentence, without ever raising his voice. Born on November 23, 1936, or maybe 1945, or 1937, depending on which record you trust, Landesberg was mysterious by design. He often lied about his age throughout his career, shaving off nearly a decade. Why? Because Hollywood doesn't write roles for aging intellectuals, it writes them for quirky 30-somethings. And Landesberg, more than anything, was a mind trapped in a business that valued youth over insight. Raised in the Bronx by Austrian Jewish parents, he had the kind of mind you couldn't script. Before acting, he did stand-up comedy in New York clubs, where his dry delivery and absurdist intelligence made him an underground sensation. His comedy was rarely about punchlines. It was about peeling back reality and exposing the absurd logic beneath it. When he joined Barney Miller in Season 3 as Detective Arthur Dietrich, something shifted. The show, already known for its quiet brilliance, suddenly became smarter, clinically smarter. Landesberg played Dietrich like a sentient Wikipedia page, dropping obscure facts about quantum physics, obscure diseases, and philosophy with the calm of a librarian reciting haikus. But what made it funny wasn't just what he said, it was how the room froze around him. He wasn't just acting. He was conducting an experiment. Behind the scenes, Landesberg was famously elusive. He rarely did interviews. When he did, he swerved around personal questions with more grace than a seasoned politician. Cast members loved working with him, but even they admitted, Steve was Steve. You didn't know him, you observed him. After Barney Miller, he continued working, but always under the radar. He appeared in shows like Head Case, That 70s Show, Two Guys, A Girl and a Pizza Place, and voiced animated characters, but he never seemed to chase fame. If anything, he seemed mildly inconvenienced by it. Then, he was gone. Steve Landesberg died on December 20, 2010, from colon cancer. But like everything else about him, his illness was private, almost hidden. His death surprised even longtime fans, many of whom hadn't realized how old he truly was. That was the paradox of Landesberg. He built a character who knew everything, but let the world know almost nothing about himself. He mastered the monologue but avoided the memoir. And yet, when Dietrich walked into that precinct, calmly stating facts about obscure bacteria while sipping cold coffee, the room changed. The energy shifted. Intelligence became its own form of comedy. Steve Landesberg wasn't a star in the traditional sense. He didn't need to be. He was the mind behind the badge. And once you heard him speak, you never forgot him. Ron Carey, the small man with a loud legacy. You didn't watch Barney Miller for action. You watched it for people. And Ron Carey made damn sure you noticed him, even if he had to stand on a desk to do it. Born Ronald Joseph Sicilia on December 11, 1935, in Newark, New Jersey, Carey was the son of Italian immigrants and raised in a blue-collar Catholic household. He studied communications at Seton Hall University, but it was comedy, raw, physical, unapologetically loud, that pulled him into show business. He took the stage name Ron Carey and quickly made a name for himself on the stand-up circuit, known for his rapid-fire delivery and motormouth energy. By the time he joined Barney Miller, Carey had already caught the attention of director Mel Brooks, who cast him in Silent Movie and later in High Anxiety and History of the World, Part 1. His comedic style was big, expressive, physical, classic Borscht Belt. But in Barney Miller, he did something rare, he made small funny. As Officer Carl Levitt, Carey played the overeager, vertically challenged uniformed cop who was never quite invited into the inner circle of the detectives. He hovered. He interjected. He offered coffee. He asked, repeatedly, for a promotion that never came. And in doing so, he embodied every ambitious underdog who ever worked thanklessly for approval that never arrived. Carey wasn't part of the main cast at first. He started as a recurring character, but his popularity forced the writers to make room for him, a testament to his ability to steal scenes with nothing more than a clipboard and a raised eyebrow. Off-screen, Carey was as bold as he was on it. Known for being outspoken and occasionally difficult, he didn't shy away from calling out what he saw as unfair treatment in the industry, especially the way shorter actors were pigeonholed. He joked that he was typecast as comic relief or elves, but it was a joke laced with resentment. After Barney Miller, his career never quite took off the way it should have. He continued to work, mostly in television and occasionally in film, but Hollywood never gave him another platform as tailored to his talents. His frenetic brand of humor, so perfect in the 70s and early 80s, began to fall out of fashion as the business shifted toward a cooler, more subdued style of comedy. Still, Ron Carey never stopped being funny. Never stopped trying. He taught acting, mentored young comedians, and even returned to the stage in his later years. He died on January 16, 2007, from a stroke at the age of 71. His passing didn't make major headlines. There was no primetime tribute. No retrospective. Just a few brief mentions, and a whole lot of silence. But for those who remember Levitt, always standing a little too close, always just a little too desperate, Ron Carey lives on. Because ambition like his, wrapped in comedy, wrapped in tragedy, doesn't disappear. It lingers. He was the background noise you eventually realized was the heartbeat of the room. And when he stopped buzzing, something felt off. Gregory Sierra, the explosive exit of a forgotten trailblazer. In a show full of understated personalities and muted performances, Gregory Sierra was a live wire. He didn't just walk into scenes, he charged into them, as if the moment might combust without his energy. And sometimes, it nearly did. Born January 25, 1937, in Spanish Harlem, New York City, Sierra was a Puerto Rican-American actor raised in a time and place where your ethnicity was a liability in Hollywood. That didn't stop him. It fueled him. His early life wasn't glitz and screen tests, it was survival, hustle, and the kind of pain that bakes itself into your bones and later comes out in your art. Sierra started on the stage, then made his way to television, always cast as the ethnic guy, the angry one, the gang member, the revolutionary. He hated it. And so when Barney Miller offered him the role of Detective Sergeant Chano Amengual in 1975, it felt like something radical. A Latino cop, not corrupt, not comic relief, but real. Proud. Angry when he had to be. Human always. He brought passion to the role. Chano was hot-headed, emotionally raw, and morally sharp. He wasn't afraid to cry on screen. In one of the series' most harrowing scenes, Chano is forced to shoot two suspects and breaks down afterward, a moment of vulnerability rarely afforded to characters of color at the time, let alone to the actors playing them. And then, he was gone. After just 2 seasons, Gregory Sierra left the show. Officially, it was to pursue other opportunities. Unofficially, rumors swirled. Some said he clashed with producers. Others hinted that Sierra felt boxed in, creatively suffocated in a role that wasn't evolving. He later said in interviews that Barney Miller had grown too tame, and he didn't want to be just another suit in the room. He tried his hand at other series, Sanford and Son, AES Hudson Street, Miami Vice. But nothing stuck the way Barney Miller did. Hollywood didn't know what to do with someone like Sierra, too ethnic for lead roles, too intense for comedy, too smart for stereotypes. He drifted to guest roles and character parts in the 80s and 90s. He appeared in Hill Street Blues, Murder, She Wrote, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But the fire seemed dimmed. The industry had passed him by, or perhaps, never really embraced him to begin with. Later in life, he retreated from the public eye. He moved to California's desert, married, and lived quietly, far from the camera, far from the applause. He rarely gave interviews, and when he did, there was a bitterness underneath the surface. A sense of having been almost remembered. He died on January 4, 2021, at the age of 83, from cancer. The obituaries were respectful but sparse. One of the most groundbreaking Latino actors of his generation slipped away with barely a whisper. But those who watched Barney Miller, especially in those early seasons, remember. They remember the fire. The fury. The scenes that shook you because Gregory Sierra refused to coast. He acted like it mattered, because for him, it did. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for a bigger part. He was the big part, even when the script didn't see it. James Gregory, the blunt instrument who spoke for a vanishing generation. There are actors who bring elegance to the screen. James Gregory brought brute force. He wasn't polished. He wasn't gentle. He was loud, brash, opinionated, and completely magnetic. Born on December 23, 1911, in the Bronx, New York, Gregory came from a working-class family and was raised during the Great Depression. Before acting, he served in the U.S. Navy and worked as a physical training instructor during World War II. He didn't enter Hollywood through drama school or modeling gigs. He came in swinging. By the time Barney Miller premiered in 1975, James Gregory was already a veteran of stage and screen. He had played cops, generals, and hard-nosed bureaucrats in everything from The Manchurian Candidate to Beneath the Planet of the Apes. If you needed someone to bark orders and roll their eyes at liberal nonsense, you called James Gregory. As Deputy Inspector Frank Luger, he was the embodiment of every outdated authority figure in American bureaucracy. Gruff, condescending, and hopelessly out of touch, Luger popped into the 12th precinct like a walking ghost of pre-civil rights era policing. He spoke in gravel. He reminisced about the good old days, and his good old days sounded horrifying. But here's the genius: Luger wasn't a villain. He wasn't hated. He was pitted. Underneath the racism, the sexism, and the cigar-stained worldview was a lonely, broken man clinging to a world that no longer existed. James Gregory played that line perfectly, giving us someone to laugh at, cringe at, and occasionally, feel sorry for. Off camera, Gregory was quieter but no less sharp. He was a committed actor, fiercely professional, and known for being blunt in real life, much like his character. Co-stars described him as all bark, no bite. He didn't do Hollywood parties. He didn't schmooze. He showed up, did the work, and went home. After Barney Miller, Gregory slowed down. He made a few TV appearances but was mostly retired by the mid-80s. The industry had changed, subtler, faster, younger, and Gregory, by then in his 70s, didn't need it anymore. He passed away on September 16, 2002, at the age of 90, from natural causes. His death was quiet. Understated. Like a character actor exiting stage left, satisfied that he'd already said his piece. But what he left behind was louder than ever. James Gregory represented a fading America, a generation of men shaped by war, raised on rigid values, and baffled by the evolution happening around them. He brought that conflict to life in every Luger scene, making us laugh, flinch, and sometimes, unexpectedly, care. He didn't whisper wisdom. He barked ignorance. And somehow, it taught us more than a monologue ever could. The precinct that time never closed. It's strange to think that a sitcom set in a single, windowless room could feel so alive, so permanent. Barney Miller wasn't just about cops. It was about people, flawed, tired, brilliant, foolish, and human to the core. And it wasn't the precinct walls or fluorescent lighting that made it great. It was the cast. A group of actors who understood that laughter is always sharper when it's hiding something true. Now, so many of them are gone. Jack Sue. Abe Vigoda. Ron Glass. Steve Landesberg. Ron Carey. Gregory Sierra. James Gregory. 7 names. 7 lives. Each with their own storms, secrets, victories, and scars. Each of them helped shape a show that never chased cheap laughs, and because of that, it remains timeless. Some of them died too young. Some quietly vanished from the spotlight. Some battled to break through barriers the industry never fully let them escape. But all of them left a mark. Barney Miller wasn't the kind of show that wins Emmys by the dozen or headlines in tabloids. It was a slow burn, subtle, patient, and razor-sharp. And maybe that's why it produced a cast so layered, so complex, and so haunting. They weren't trying to be stars. They were trying to be real. And that reality, laced with tragedy, brilliance, and a touch of bitterness, is what made them unforgettable. So, who succeeded? All of them, in their own way. Success isn't just in trophies or headlines. Sometimes, it's in the characters that still feel alive 40 years later. Sometimes, it's in the episode someone stumbles upon at 2 a.m. and watches all the way through, because the voices sound true. Who failed? Maybe Hollywood. Maybe an industry that never quite knew what to do with actors like these, too ethnic, too old, too smart, too different. And who walked away? Too many. But not before leaving pieces of themselves behind. So the next time you hear the theme song, that gentle jazz bass, those lonely drums, remember who's no longer here. And remember how much they gave us before the curtain closed. And if you made it this far, you're one of us. A keeper of the flame. Subscribe to this channel to join us as we explore more stories like this, stories buried beneath applause and forgotten fame. Because sometimes, the best stories, are the ones no one told. Until now.